just to try and make it a bit easier to service and clean the engine. So most of it will be about the ACD unit. For those of you that I trained on the 9200, the actual way that the ACD unit works hasn't changed that much, apart from this time it works. So we haven't got the error codes that we had with the old unit anymore. But I'll talk to you about that when we get to it. So I think I'll share my screen, which means that I can't see who's in the meeting anymore, but let's change the screen. If you get any questions whilst we're going through the training, could you please put them into chat? I have Bart monitoring the chat so that he will interrupt me if there's any questions, and then we can just go through them, and that would be good. Okay, so I'll share my screen. Eating muted me, so I don't know how long I've been muted for, but I've been chatting away for for a while, talking. So I'll just repeat what I just said. If you get any questions, please put them into chat. And I have Bart monitoring the chat. For those of you that I trained on the 9200, the way that it works hasn't really changed all that much, except on this machine it works. We tended to disable it on the 9200 because it threw up error codes and there were problems with it. It didn't work very well. But now there's been a lot of improvements to it. It does work. It's an option for this machine, so it doesn't come as standard anymore. It's something that customers have to buy if they want it. Can one of you unmute and let me know that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. That's fantastic. Okay, so let's start going through the training. So this is what we're going to look at. First of all, we'll look at the sales concept. There's only 2 slides, but I think it's quite important to try and promote this new unit because now it does work. There's a few things you need to know about it, but it does work now. So we'll go through the sales concept. Then we'll take a look at what auto color diagnosis is. Then we'll look at IQM, which is image quality management. Sorry, I just have to mute for a sec because I'm about to cough. I really need to give up smoking. We'll look at the new user interface and what you need to be able to use that. Then we'll look at some limitations. Then after that, we'll look at the self-maintenance, so what the user or the operator needs to do in order to use this. And lastly, we'll look at the service improvements. So I mentioned earlier that they've made some improvements to the engine. They are very minor. It's things like changes in cover shapes and things like that, but it's all there to make it a little bit easier for you guys to service the engine. Okay, so the sales concept. So unfortunately, with the previous engine, with the 9200, there was quite some problems with the ACD unit. We had a lot of SC codes. On this unit, well, at least according to the beta test that happened, we had a beta test in Germany and a beta test in the Netherlands, and none of the SC codes came back on this unit. So that's what we're kind of going by. So the SC codes have been cured on this engine, and they've made a lot of changes to overcome the errors that happened on the previous version. It is a unique technology. It's something that isn't available in the market anywhere. Konica have something similar, but our system actually scans the image, and Konicker's doesn't. It scans some color charts on the edge of the page. So that's where we see in the market that ours is better than the competition's, because we actually scan the image itself. The image quality manager, we have improved the reliability. We've made some changes to the engine so that it scans better. And it's there to kind of stop the customer having to do a manual inspection. So when we see the user interface, which is completely new, it wasn't available for the previous version. It actually tells you which page and which page number there's an error on, so you can go straight to it and check it for yourself. Sorry, I was just taking a sip of water because my voice is going already. That's not a good sign. I've got another session this afternoon. And yeah, it's we've launched it again to try and compete against the Konica Minolta because of their scanning, their color verifying procedure that they have. But with us scanning the image and them scanning color charts, it's well, we think we've got the edge. Okay, so the value proposition is aimed at things like customers that do a manual inspection. So if you do a manual inspection of your print, then normally you do a random inspection, maybe 20 sheets out of 1,000. So you can potentially miss the defect. So obviously with this system you won't miss the defect. So you shouldn't need to do a manual check with this system. Also, if they're not doing a manual inspection but they know that they should, then obviously they don't need to with this system. So moving on to auto color diagnosis. It has two features. It has ACD, which we had on the 9200, which is there for adjusting any kind of color fluctuation that may occur during a print run. So if you calibrate the engine but you're doing a really long print run, as the engine gets older and as the parts start to wear out, you can have a color fluctuation. And this system will check that and will do any internal adjustments to try and compensate and keep the color as accurate as it can. And then we have an image quality monitor, and the image quality monitor is there to check for any defects. So things like white spots, white lines, black spots, anything like that, the machine will check for, and then it will tell the customer if there's a problem with one. And I think I have a better slide to try and explain actually how it works better in a minute. So, yeah, it says there it's the world's first. Well, actually, it's the world's second, but the first one didn't work. So this is the world's first that works, which is good. So the amount of fluctuations is calculated by automatically selecting the most suitable areas. And it does make numerous measurements, and it checks on every color. So each CMYK color, it will check it individually. So, versus Konica Minolta. The biggest difference is whether the color measurements are made from color patches printed or from the actual print job. And R1 does it from the actual print job. And I mentioned earlier that Konica Minolta, it only scans color patches that are printed at the edge of the print job. So it doesn't check the actual print job. So that's where we see that ours is slightly superior to Konica Minolta's. So the feedback process. When you start running a print job, pages 1 to 4, the machine will generate a color standard. So it will look at the color and say, okay, this is the colors that we're reproducing. And then it will move on to pages 5 to 8, and it will look at the color again and compare that to the color standard. And then it will calculate if there's a difference in the color, it will calculate a correction value. And then after page 16, it will start to correct that color. And it does that, sorry, after page 18. I should read my own slide. Yeah, sorry, after page 18, it will start to correct that. And then it does it every 16 pages. So for 16 pages, it will apply the same correction value. Then it will check it again. And for the next 16 pages, it will apply the new correction value. Yeah, on the previous version, it was every 20 pages. But now they've reduced it to every 16, which is that's a good improvement. So this is it in a bit more detail. So pages 1 to 4, it generates the base color standard. And yeah, you can see, I don't know if you can see my mouse on Teams. I'm assuming that you can, but you see it scans the page. Sorry?
We can see your mouse.
Okay, that's good. It generates down here, it generates the standard value for the color. And then pages 5 to 8, it will calculate the color deviation. Then it will do some calculation, and it will start to apply the correctional value from page 18. And then it continues to do that. So every 16 pages, it will apply another correctional value. So it's constantly measuring the color, and it's constantly applying adjustments every 16 pages. No questions yet, Bart?
No, apparently everything is clear.
Well, I'm glad it is for you, because for me it's not.
Well,
okay. The images, we have suitable print jobs and not suitable print jobs for the ACD. So the suitable images, big images that spread across the page like this one. It also needs to have highlight, middle and shadow on the page. Oh, didn't mean to click my button. Distributed in the main scan direction, a variety of colors. They're all good for the ACD system. Bad ones, well, if you have a single color, for example, that's not good for scanning. If you don't have the highlight, the middle and the shadows on the page, that's also not good for feedback. A small image, not good, or not distributed evenly in the main scan direction. So you have to bear this in mind. There's good images, there's not so good images for the ACD system. So for good, I've mentioned this again. You can see here an example. So a good image covering the whole page. This is an adequate one. That's not as good, but yeah, the ACD system still can correct for that. Things with a lot of text down the bottom here, they're not good and not suitable. Obviously, when you have just purely text, it's not going to correct that color. Some technical improvements that we've made. Well, for color fluctuation, control performance is the major one. The inline sensor has been changed. It's very similar, but there's a new guide for the inline sensor that keeps the page very flat. It stops it from flapping, which was one of the big problems we had with the previous version. With the previous version, in the paper path at that sensor, the gap was a bit too wide, and the paper would actually, as it passed through, it would flap, so it would move, and that caused a fluctuation in the readings and would falsely give an error code when it wasn't needed. I won't go through the rest of this slide because it's just specifications, and you can read through the training material, so I won't go through everything. So this is the improvement we've made to the inline sensor. You can see that the difference between the old version here, this was caused, these jumps were caused by the page flapping, and obviously we've reduced it now because we have this extra guide here on the TIM mag sensor. And it says ACD performance has been much improved by this modification. It has. It has. We haven't had any errors from the beta test on this system. So this was the old 9200 TIM mag, and you can see this is the new guide plate. So just here that we've added to the 9200 plus, and that is there to stop any kind of fluctuation of the media that's passing under the TIM mag sensor and the TIM red sensor, and that has improved the system a lot. I do want to promote this because this system does work. It's not like the 9200.
Okay, Keith, we have an interesting question from Manuel.
Okay.
Does the paper thickness has an impact on the ACD reading?
Not thickness. You can't have it too thin. So paperweight 1 is not supported with the ACD system because the rear side will show through the paper. But after paperweight 1, anything above that is supported. There is media that's not supported. For instance, if it's textured media, that's not supported. Transparency is also not supported. There's a few, but on the limitations, when we come to the limitations, there's a list. But thickness doesn't have an effect apart from paperweight 1. That does have an effect. I hope that answers the question. Okay, so this is a comparison slide between having color homing switched off and color homing switched on. So with it switched on, you can see that the deviation is a lot less, and this is done from testing at RCL. So in Japan, they tested with it switched off and they tested with it switched on. So this is the graph that came from them. This is part of the user interface that comes with the engine. Sorry, I have to have another drink, so I'm just going to go back on mute for 2 seconds. Okay, sorry about that. That's better. Yeah, so the customer can actually view it in real time. I don't know why I'm hoping you can see my screen again. I don't know why that switched off.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Bart. Yeah, so this is part of the user interface. The customer can monitor in real time any deviation in the color. At the moment, this isn't available. It's still under development, but will become available with a firmware upgrade. They said should happen by December, but it's not there yet. But soon, I hope. So the error codes. Error code 693 was very common with the old system, and this is the error code that caused everybody to switch and disable the system on the 9200. But like I say, on the beta test, we didn't have a single error code relating to the ACD. So they have done a lot of improvements. The error code was a communication error. Yeah, and it has been a problem reported from the field constantly for the Andromeda P2. On the Andromeda P2, if you switch the engine off and on, then the error code just goes. But obviously that's not a good fix. But that was the only one that we had.
Okay, Keith, is it possible to rebuild the Pro C9200 ACD? That's a question from Roger.
No.
No, that's clear.
Yeah.
And then we have a question from Pavel as well. Is it planned to modify old versions with new guide plate? And
not at the moment. Maybe it will come. But at the moment, this is just for the 9200 Plus. So it's not, you can't modify the old version. Unfortunately. Whether that comes in the future, I don't know. I haven't had anything from Japan about that yet.
Keith, it's Neil here. I can tell you that it won't happen.
Oh, okay, thanks, Neil. That's a shame. So that answers the question, guys. The 9200 is the 9200, and you can't modify that one. No. Thanks, Neil. Okay, some of the improvements. We had some misdetection before, and we had various faults when they compared the master image with the scanned image, and they've rectified those faults. There was a timeout error with the ACD, and they've rectified that one as well. They've increased the data transfer capacity to prevent timeout errors. So they've done a lot of firmware fixes to this unit to make this one work. I won't go through every single thing that they've fixed, but I just want you to be aware that there's been a lot of research that's gone into this system. I have it in Amstelveen, and I've been running prints through it in Amstelveen, and I've also had no errors come back. I've had errors in the image, so the system has told me that I've got a white streak or a dark streak, mainly because I have a fault with the magenta drum in the one in Amstelveen. So it picks up the errors in the image, but it doesn't give you an SC code, which is good news. The firmware, you need to have the firmware at a specific level. So when you install your machine, check the firmware version and make sure that it's at this firmware version or later, in order to make sure that the ACD system will work. So let's talk about image quality management. So how does it work? Just bear with me while I cough. I do have to stop smoking. The way the image quality management works is inside the engine. You have a second RIP. So you have the fiery controller, which is your first RIP, which is normal for any of our CIP range. So you have the fiery RIP, which takes the print job data, turns it into information that the printer can understand in order to print the job. What it also does is, when it turns it into this information, this digital information, it sends that information to the second RIP that's inside the engine, which used to be called the pyramid system for guys that I trained on the 9200. Sends it to this second RIP. What also happens at the same time is, as the machine is printing, it scans the image. So it has a digital image of what the image should look like. Then it scans the image, and it will compare the scanned image to the digital image. So the digital image is what it should be. The scanned image is what it actually is. It compares these two images, and it looks at the color between the two images, and that's when it will make its correction. So if the scanned image is different to the digital image that it should be, then it will make corrections in order to change the scanned image of the printed page to match the digital image. If there's any questions, please ask them, because this is probably the key to the system. This is the heart of how this system works. And I hope I've explained it okay, but if I haven't, please ask questions. Bart, is there any questions?
No, not yet.
Okay. Dennis, please.
I have a question.
Okay.
Question in general.
Hey, Goes.
Keith. In the past, and I think it is still now, you have to enable the ACD for a specific type of paper. Otherwise,
yes, you do. Yeah.
But if you change something on the paper properties,
Goes, don't ask me that question.
Okay.
No. I'm joking.
But if you change some settings on the specific paper, the system is directly disabled.
Yeah.
And a lot of customers here in the Netherlands, they changed something on the paper settings because the registration or temperature and so on, they change it.
Yep.
And then they have to make to disable to enable it again, and that's not so. What the customer wants.
No, I know. Thank you
So
for that.
it is a nice system, but it is too sensitive for changing something.
Yep. You want to know if that's changed on this system?
I hope that they will change if they change something on registration, image registration, that not the system will disable.
Yeah, it's the same on this one. I understand, and I understand it is a pain. That's the only thing about this system. If you change anything in the paper settings, so if you've already generated the ACD settings on a media, and then you change something in the paper settings, you still have to generate those settings again.
Yeah, that's a big disadvantage.
Yeah. I understand. And to be honest, generating the data that the system needs is time consuming, because you have to calibrate, you have to clean the sensors. You clean the sensors before you calibrate, then you generate the settings that it needs, and then you can use it. So yeah, I understand, Goes. It's just something that you have to explain to customers. I understand customers don't want to do it, but if they want to use the system, they have to do it. So they have to spend 10 minutes if they do change anything. And it doesn't take longer than 10 minutes. But I understand it's a pain. I'm sorry that's still the same.
Okay, Keith, there's another question.
Yeah.
IQM, you mentioned Fiery controller, but I suppose it's the same for the Rigel controller? Question from Frank.
That's a good question, Frank. Yes, the Rigel controller was supported on the 9200, so I would imagine it's also supported on the 9200 Plus. But I will have to confirm that, Frank. So let me make a note of that. So, actually, Neil, if you're still on the call, do you know the answer to that?
Is that control still available for the
I'm not sure.
The controller is still available for it, and I am 98% sure that it is still working for Rigel, but we just need to confirm that, I think.
Okay, I'll make a note of it still, and I'll confirm that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is, actually, but yeah.
Jay Neal, it's good to have you on the call.
The Rigel is still compatible. Only the new devices are not supported. But the Rigel controller on itself should work.
Okay, I'll confirm it anyway. I'll double check with PSSC and make sure it is. And now I'm having to dual authenticate, so just bear with me a second. This new system of dual authentication, I love it.
Okay, that's it for the questions. So
okay,
far.
good. I'm just waiting for a message to come through on my phone to allow me to authenticate. Yeah, and it's not coming through. Don't you just love this new system of security?
No.
No, it's not. Okay, well, let's just carry on. I will ignore that signing request. Okay, so things that it detects. This is just some examples that we had from the beta test. So things like black spots, it will check. If we have a wrinkle in the page, it will detect that. Dirty background, it will detect just some dirty smudges we have here. Some mottle effect. Again, dirty background. On this one, you can see here that the black isn't as black as it should be. I hope you can see this on your screens. And now on here, we just have a blurred image around the text. So it will detect all of these errors, and it will give a message to the operator to say, hey, look, you might want to check this page. I'll talk about whether it disables printing a bit later, because there's ways that you can stop that. So this is how it works. So first of all, we have the property generation. So where you create the media information and you generate the ACD settings that it needs, excuse me, in order to compare the images. Then we print the job, and during the job, maybe we get a defect that gets detected. If there is a defect, we still get this error screen, and I'm really not a fan of this error screen. It's the same error screen that we had on the 9200. It's on the operation panel, and it literally says you've got an error, and the error code is code 30, for example. It doesn't give you a message to say we've detected a white streak or a black streak. This message doesn't tell you that. You have to go to enter the user interface. Over here, you see the user interface, and on the user interface, you get a thumbnail image with an example with the error code, with the error displayed. So if it's a white line on the thumbnail image, you can see that white line. It's just unfortunate that you get this screen that just gives you a code, and I think if you don't explain that to your customers, it will cause service codes, because all they see on here is an error code. They need to then look at the user interface to find out what's actually happened with the image. So it's something that you need to train your customers to do. And once you've checked this, you then go to, you go to your printout, you find the page that had the defect on it, you check that page, and if it's acceptable, you just carry on. If it's not acceptable, you remove the page, or you remove that job, or start again.
Keith, we have a question from Takayoshi. So if you are a customer using the IQM and it stops for those items, customer checks the print for those, then how should the customer proceed? Is there any guidance for them to resolve the issue that IQM has picked up? Because the issue is probably going to reoccur if you continue to print.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the error could just be dust on the TIM mag sensor, for instance. If there's dust on the TIM mag sensor, the scanned image will look like it's got a white line because it can't see past that dust. the same as if you had dust on your laser slick glass, you would then get a white line on your scanned image. So there is some user manuals on maintenance that the customer has to do to rectify these faults. And I have to stress this. It's so important for you to explain. I've got some slides at the end that go through the user maintenance on what they would need to do in order to rectify the fault. You need to tell your customers about this, and you need to explain it to your customers. Otherwise, you will get called out, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So train your customers. You have to train them on the user interface. You have to train them that the message that they get on the operation panel, just because it says you've got an error code, it's an error code that relates to the image, not an error code that relates to the machine. So you have to look at the user interface. You have some self-maintenance that you can do, that the customer can do. You have to go through all of this with them in order to make this system work as it should. And if you don't do that, if you don't go through this training with your customer, well, then you will just have more work to do, because you will be called out. And that's what we don't want to happen. So I will go through some of the maintenance at the end. I haven't done every single one, because a lot of it is common sense, but there is some user guides that are available. I'm not sure if they're on my Rico yet. This training isn't on my Rico yet because I haven't written an exam. I just needed to get the training prepared and out as soon as I could. But I hope to have this all available maybe by the end of the first week in January. Then I hope to have it available. Same. I've got some other products as well that I need to make available. So it's just a matter of time, unfortunately, which I don't have at the moment. But so there is user guides available. At the end of the presentation, you'll see some of it. For you technical guys that are out there, a lot of it will make sense and be quite common sense for you guys anyway. So the first thing you need to do is, if you're installing this system, it is an option now, the system. So there is a procedure, in the service manual to actually install the ACD system, what was the pyramid system, so the second RIP. There is a procedure in the service manual to install the actual physical RIP itself. So when you do your installation, if they have ordered this, just go through that installation procedure. I've been through it myself, and it's fairly straightforward if you follow the service manual. But just be aware it is now in there. It never used to be because it came as standard with the old machine, but now it's an option. But once you've installed it, you still need to enable it. So you enable it in user tools, so in machine features, into system settings. And then once you're into system settings, you need to make sure that all of these are active. So for the auto color diagnostic unit setting, make sure they're all active, and then the system will work. There's also some SP modes. I haven't had a chance to go through all of the SP modes yet, and if I'm honest, the service manual doesn't give a great description of what the SP modes do. But you can change things like the threshold setting, whether the machine will stop or not. You can also do in SP mode, but you can also do that with other settings as well in the user interface. So the customer can change all of that, and you need to explain to the customer not to change. Not to change some of the settings, and we'll go through those a bit later. So for the image quality management, it will print some inspection patterns. These patterns are necessary, so you have to print them. It's mandatory to print these patterns if you're using the IQM, so they have to be printed outside of the image area, outside of your crop marks. The machine will scan these as well as the image, and it uses these to maintain the image quality. You don't have to print these. These are page numbers, so it's there for the customer's benefit, really, so that they have when they see an error on the user interface, it will give you the page number. And obviously, if you print them on the actual print job as well, it's easier to find that page. But you don't have to print these. It's just there to make the customer's life a little bit easier. But again, it's printed outside of the image area, outside the crop marks. So, for your inspection patterns, by default, it's switched on, which means that the inspection patterns will be printed on every single job, whether they're using the image quality monitor for that job or not. And there is unsupported media, so they may not be using the image quality monitor for all of their jobs. So just make sure that when you go in, this is part of the user interface, which I'll talk about later. But inside the user interface, you can switch it on to automatic, which means that it'll only be printed on jobs that are... Sorry, I'm coughing again. It means that it will only be printed on jobs that are actually using the image quality function. So just make sure it's switched to auto. Yeah, this is the ID number. Again, like I mentioned earlier, that it's not mandatory. You don't have to print these, but you can set it to print the ID numbers so that the customer can easily identify which page has the error. Okay, moving on to the ACD process.
One moment, Keith, we have a question from Ilan. Does function IQM affect the printer speed?
No.
So that's an easy answer.
Yeah.
That's good.
It doesn't slow the machine down at all. It scans it at the engine speed.
Yeah.
So there's no productivity loss.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is one of the things that we're asking customers to do. So before you register a custom paper, clean the inline sensor. So give the inline sensor. You're supposed to clean it in one direction only. It doesn't matter which direction, but only in one direction so that you don't wipe any dust back onto the glass. And I think it's the same with the roller. Yeah, use a cleaning cloth to wipe the glass surface, the bias roller above the revolver. So clean the roller that's underneath the tin mag sensor, and you can rotate that. There's 4 rollers on that tin mag sensor. So clean the glass first, then open it up, clean the roller. There's 2 white and 2 black rollers. The white rollers it uses for dark media, and the dark rollers it uses for pale or white media. So make sure you clean all of them. Again, the rollers in one direction only, and you just use a dry cloth for that. Oh, yeah, there we go. There's the roller. So you can see here, this is the roller. There's white plates on it. You can see here the 2 black rollers. There's a grey shading correction plate on it, and then underneath you can't see, but there's also 2 white rollers underneath. So when you clean it, you need to turn this gear at the front to, just a drive gear. You can just turn that by hand, and then you'll expose the other rollers underneath. That's something you need to explain to the customers. So IQM only works with a custom paper. So you have to register your media in your custom paper library. If you register your media by just saying, well, this is recycled paper, paperweight 1, and so on, the old way, then image quality, it cannot work with that. It will only work with a custom paper. So it's mandatory that a customer has to register their paper. There's some limitations on the paper sizes and thickness. So I mentioned earlier that thickness level 1 isn't supported because the light shines. I'm really struggling with my voice today. Guys, I'm really sorry about this. So level 1 isn't supported because the light will shine through from the LEDs. You can see the type of paper: plain, recycled, gloss, high gloss, matte and synthetic. Unsupported papers, I mentioned some of these earlier. So embossed or textured paper, coloured paper. I'm not sure what they mean by design paper, but whatever that is, that's not supported either. And also film, so transparency is not supported. So part of the process, once you've cleaned the tin mag sensor, is to perform a calibration. So you can do this in Command Workstation. Just select Calibrate and calibrate the media. Once you've calibrated, just make sure that the color profile that's associated to that media is correct. So you technical guys should all know how to do this. If you don't, there's training on my Rico that you can go through in order to show you. Then we need to launch the ACD, and you can do this in two ways. You can do this either in the calibration screen. So once you've done your calibration, you get this screen that gives you the results. And then there's just a little tick box that you can click that says generate ACD after calibration. And if you do this tick box, as soon as you apply and close it, it will generate the ACD properties for you. If you forget to do that tick box, you can go into Web Tools on the Fiery and you can launch the ACD screen. And there you can also generate the ACD calibration settings that the machine needs. So there's two ways to do it. By far the easiest way is to just tell your customers to do this tick box. Then when it goes through, once it's done the settings, you'll see on the ACD screens on the Fiery controller, you'll see that it's either enabled, not applicable, or disabled. So for disabled, you just haven't generated the properties. So yeah, you need to launch it. If it's enabled, like this one here, then the properties have been generated, and when you run that media, the ACD system will work for that media. If it's not applicable, it means that it's an unsupported paper or paper size. So if it's too small for the ACD system to work, then it won't ever be enabled. It will just be not applicable. And the same with the paper type. So if it's registered as a textured media, it will always be not applicable. Okay. So also in here, when it's not applicable, if the customer wants to do it, they can generate it. So here's the button here. So they just click generate ACD property. This is the second way to do it if you're not using the system from the Fiery calibration screen. It's easier to use the Fiery calibration screen, but they can do it on in the ACD property screen. So just generate the ACD property. The machine then will print some test charts, which are here. Prints out 9 color test charts, and you can see it's almost like the test charts that you produce for a color profile. So I don't know for definite that it creates a profile, but I suspect that it does for the second rip. So it will print these test charts. The tin mag sensor will read these test charts, and it will generate, for argument's sake, a color profile for the media, and then it uses these readings to scan for the color deviation. Any questions, Bart?
Nope.
Cool. Okay.
No, I will interrupt you if there are.
Yeah, I know. I just like to talk to you.
Okay.
Once it's generated these test charts, so once it's printed these and scanned them, it will then enable that media in the screen. And this, Hoos mentioned this earlier, this is what a customer has to do if they change any settings on the media. If they change a setting on the media, then it will go back to being disabled, and they need to generate these ACD properties again for that specific media. There is some settings that the customer can change now that doesn't affect the ACD system, things like the media size. So if they have whatever this media is at the moment, it's set to A4. Now if they change that media to A3, it will stay as enabled. Just as an example, on the previous system, that would also have disabled it. So there are some settings that don't affect whether it's enabled or disabled. But if you change things like the fuser temperature, for example, that will still disable the ACD systems because it has an effect on the image that's produced, on the color. So if you raise the temperature, you all know that the color will become a little bit more glossy. If you reduce the temperature, it becomes a bit more matte. So it will disable these settings. Anything that affects the color reproduction will disable anything to do with the ACD, and they must recreate these settings again, which makes sense. Also makes sense that if you change the paper size, it doesn't affect this anymore, which wasn't true for the old system. Okay, this is the error message. This is the bit that I'm not that keen on this setup, and this is the reason, and it's the only reason that I'm not that keen on this error message, because all you get is an error code. So if, for example, if they have the user interface on, they can see it, but if they happen to have switched off the monitor, then all they're going by is this message. If it's just a user that's using the engine that hasn't been trained, they will report that as an error code. And I would much rather that it didn't have an error code and just says, please look at the user interface to see what happened. You've got a problem with your image. Something that points them towards the user interface, in my opinion, would be much better than just having an error code. Anyway, this is as it is. There's nothing I can do. The user interface, we'll talk about this a bit because this is new for the 9200 Plus. So you have your ACD unit, still the same. You will recognize this if you guys have seen the 9200. It's the old pyramid system. It's exactly the same. But now, part of your installation procedure is you need to have a PC. You need to have a PC, and it needs to be directly connected to the back of the pyramid system. There's an Ethernet port in the back. You install a PC. You connect an Ethernet cable to the PC. You connect an Ethernet cable to the pyramid system. You need to go to your PC settings and set an IP address, a fixed IP address of this one. So 192.168.1.10. And that's really all you need to do in order to use the user interface. So set the IP address. It can then talk to the pyramid system. Then, in order to use the user interface, you open a browser. So you open Internet Explorer or Chrome or whatever is on the whatever is on that client PC, and in the address window, you put in this IP address, so 192.168.1.2. You put that into the address bar. As soon as you press the return button, you will get a login screen. And this is the login screen here. You put in admin, and the default password is just password. Select your language. If you don't select the language, then it will just pick the language that's in your regional settings for your browser. Excuse me, sorry. So yeah, either pick your language or it would default to your browser language. Push login, and then you get a screen like this. This is the first screen that comes up with your user interface, and you can see over here you have a list of jobs that have been printed. Any ones that had a defect will be highlighted with red, so you get a subtle red highlight. You have a search bar, search button, so you can search through your jobs. You can export your settings. You can refresh. You can even sort by each of these items in the top here. So if you wanted to sort by defective pages, for example, you would get all of the jobs that had defective pages first, which is probably sensible. Over here you have a menu bar, so you can click through different settings. Unfortunately, I can't remote into this PC because and physically show you, because like I said, it's directly connected to the pyramid system, so I can't connect it to the network in order to remote in, so we have to go by the slides. But I've captured, I think, almost every window that you can see, so we'll talk through this because this is new. This isn't available for the 9200.
Okay, Keith, we have a question from Andreas. Can I use the Fiery PC for the IQM?
No. Because it has to be directly connected to the pyramid system, and then you can't connect it to the network. So you would effectively disable the Fiery controller. So the Fiery controller's got two Ethernet ports. One of the Ethernet ports has to be connected to the engine. The other one has to be connected to the network in order for the customer to print. So there is no Ethernet port available that's left for you to connect it to the IQM. So the answer is no. You can't use the Fiery controller for this. You have to have a dedicated PC for this. Okay, so this is still the user interface screen. And you can see if you click on threshold settings, which is one of the, if I go back to the previous screen, the first screen. So you click on this threshold settings in order to get to this menu. Japan has set in the default, you've got 5 threshold settings here. You've got level 1 to 5. 5 is the strictest. So if you get a very minor fault, level 5 will pick it up and it will show an error. Level 4 is the next one down, and level 1 is the loosest. So it's the most flexible, level 1. By default, Japan is setting this to level 4, so fairly strict. What we're recommending is you set this to level 2. So not the loosest, not the loosest level, but the next level up, which will detect things that the human eye can see. Level 4 will detect things that the customer would never see. So that's why we're recommending that you change the level setting to level 2. So please make sure you do this. The unfortunate thing is customers can change it. So the customer can change it to level 5. If they do that, well, then you will be there a lot if they're using this system. So instruct the customer not to change the level setting. Leave it at level setting 2 and tell them just to leave it alone. Don't play with it.
Okay, Keith, we have probably a question from Osama because he raised his hand. Osama, you can open your mic and talk to Keith.
Hi, I just want to know any hardware changes in the 92 plus or 9200 in the ACD hardware changes.
On the engine, you mean?
No, ACD, yes, ACD hardware changes.
There is no ACD hardware changes. Oh, there is in the TIM mag sensor. There's that extra guide in the TIM mag sensor. But in the engine, there's been some changes. The only change that affects the actual ACD system, the only physical change that affects the ACD system, is that new guide in the TIM mag to keep the paper flat and stop it from flapping. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Oh no. I need to know in the pyramid section.
In the what section, sorry?
Pyramid.
Any hardware changes in the pyramid system? The only changes in the pyramid system is firmware.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now in 92 we can access same IQM web in the user interface.
No.
No. Why it can be? Because same hardware, right?
No. This isn't available for the 9200.
But same hardware we can't access.
No.
Okay.
No, it won't work. The pyramid system for the 9200 isn't compatible with this user interface, and also you can't physically change the TIM mag sensor on the 9200. So this system is only available for the 9200 plus. So from the new model onwards, it won't be available for the old version.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Keith, I think they mentioned the plates where you were talking about. Is that in the TIM mag or in the TIM red?
Sorry, it's in the TIM red. I said TIM mag. That was my mistake. It's in the TIM red. The TIM mag on the 9200 and the 9200 plus only does color front to back registration. It doesn't do anything to do with color. It's the TIM red that does all of the color adjustments. Does that answer that? I hope it answers that. So anything to do with color adjustments, always a TIM red sensor. Yeah, like I mentioned, TIM mag only does front to back registration. It does that's the only job it does on the 9200 and the 9200 plus for that. Okay, in the user interface, this one you can access this screen by going into edit here in the threshold settings. So if you go into edit, you'll come to this screen where you can change you can change margins and stuff that it needs, but we'll talk about that later. Excuse me. But you can also take to the machine, if you detect an error, don't stop printing, which is quite important. If by default this is switched off, which means that if the machine detects an error, it will stop printing. And the customer probably doesn't want that. If the customer's gone to have a cup of coffee, comes back and finds that their machine has been stopped for 10 minutes, they probably don't want that. So in order to stop it, just do this tick box, and then the machine it'll still detect the error, it will still tell the customer what page it's on, but it will continue to do the print job. The customer then, once the print job is finished, can go find the page, see if it's a problem for the customer or not. If it's not, well then they finish the print job. But just make sure that if they don't want it to stop printing, tick this tick box. That's quite an important one.
Okay, Keith, we have another raised hand from Roger Tolston. So
this is great. This is great. I'm getting lots of questions today. I like it when I get questions.
Yeah, this is actually not Roger. This is Gabriel here.
Yeah.
Hi, Gabriel.
I just wonder if you order a machine without the ACD system, because this is an option, as you said earlier. What will you not get? I can assume that I will not receive the pyramid itself. But what about the scanner, and what about the TIM red and stuff like that?
Yeah, you still get that.
Okay.
Because without the pyramid system, obviously you won't get any of this functionality that you have with the with the ACD unit. But you can still do things like inline calibration on this one. So you with the old system and with this system, you can do a calibration that the machine does rather than having to scan it with an ES2000. Without this unit, you can still do the inline calibration, so the machine can still calibrate itself. But that's the only function that the Tim Red will have if you don't have this system.
Yeah, makes sense. So is it possible to upgrade if you order a machine without the pyramid? Is it possible to upgrade the machine later?
Yeah.
Good.
Because it's just part of the installation procedure. It's an optional extra. So yeah, if you order a machine without this and then decide, I don't know, 6 months later you want to install it, just follow the installation procedure for the ACD unit, activate it in user tools, and you're good to go.
Good. Thank you. That's all.
Cool. I like questions, especially questions that I can answer. I don't like ones that I can't answer. Okay, so this is something else that's in the user interface. So if you double click on that on this image here, so the thumbnail, you get a larger image, and it will show you the defects in more detail. So you can make it bigger, because obviously on this thumbnail image, if it's just two or one little black spot, you can't see it. You can, well, I can see on my monitor just that on this thumbnail image there's two white lines. So it does show you the error on the thumbnail image, but obviously if you enlarge it, you can see it better. Okay. It is possible to this is another screen that's available under edit. So you can, if you set your threshold level to level 2, you can also change settings inside that detection level to customize it. This is also available for the customer, so you can change other things like size of speck or white hole. You can change that in there and change the levels. So you could, for instance, have it set to level 2, but have this specific fault set to level 1. So you can customize it even further. I would suggest that you don't do that. I would suggest just leave it at level 2 and don't do this. But it is possible. So I just wanted you to be aware of that.
Okay, we have a question from Guus.
Guus is it's always Guus.
That's a simple question. You told me a few showers that he shows the defects on the print image. And in the beginning, you said he measured the 4 page 1 till 4, and then he will calculate it. And after page 18, he will change something in the image.
Yeah.
But what will happen if you print, for example, books? Every page is different.
Yeah.
How does he know?
It doesn't.
So it doesn't work if you have a print job.
If your colours change, if for instance you print 4 cyan pages and then 4 magenta pages, then the system doesn't work.
Okay. So the system works only if you print the same type of pages.
Yeah. Well, they have to have CMYK, so it has to be a full color image for it to be detected. If you have a full color image, for example, on page 1, and then the page 2 to 200 is just text, like maybe you've got a front cover of a book, then it won't work.
Yeah, but I can, for example, you have a photo book, and every page consists of other photos.
Yeah, then it works. Because each photo will contain CMYK, and it scans each value separately. So it will scan the cyan values, it will scan the yellow, magenta, and black values separately. So long as the next photo in the photo book contains CMYK, then it will work.
Okay, so the content of the page is not important
No.
If there is enough color, then it is okay.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be the same image on each page. If it's a photo book containing different photos, it still works.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Cool. Oh, by the way, Koos, that was talking about IQM, image quality management. This is ACD at the moment that we're talking about. So this is defects with the image, not color fluctuation.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, good. Yeah, you have some other settings inside the user interface. Things like you can set up administrators and users and set their username and password, and then it just restricts what they can do on the user interface. So you have account management, you have network settings where you can see the network settings. I don't think you can adjust the network settings here. I think you have to go into the control panel of the actual computer itself and do it in the network settings. You have backup and restore, so you can export the settings that you've set only to the local hard drive of the computer, the one that's using the monitor. So you can only back this up to the local hard drive because the PC isn't connected to the network. So there is no functionality to be able to back this up to a network location. Okay. In here, I mentioned earlier this little search button. You have an advanced search, so you can select pages that have got no defects or color defects, white defects, and you can search for those specific jobs. So it's just an advanced search. Okay, you can auto delete jobs. You can store up to 10 million pages, which is quite a lot. But it's not 1 million jobs that I'm talking about. It's not 10 million jobs. It's 10 million pages. So I say it's quite a lot, but that could just be one job. But you can store up to 10 million pages. After that, it deletes the pages. It will delete the oldest page first. Some limitations. And wow, this is good. I actually expected this session to last about an hour. I can see we're already on an hour and a quarter. This is just some specifications really to do with the inspection patterns. So what it needs 2 millimeters from the edge, 4 millimeters from the lead edge, and it should then be printed outside of, this is the image area, so this grey area is the image area. It should be printed outside of the grey area. Now with registration marks, that changes slightly. You have different dimensions that you need for the registration marks. So again, it's just really for information. This is the what you need, but it's outside the image area, outside the crop marks. And again, there's some more here. So this is for the identification number. Okay. So this is another limitation. And this is actually, you can see it's got white lines. I don't know if you can see that on your monitors. I hope you can. It's got some white lines. But this is in the artwork. This is what the customer wanted to print. But it may trigger an error code because the ACD system will see these as white lines if they're very, very fine. So the workaround, and you'll see this is the same workaround for most of these limitations, is to decrease the detection level. But if you've already decreased the detection level to level 2, then I hope it doesn't, that these limitations won't occur. These were detected at level 4, which is what the default was in Japan. So reduce it to level 2, and I hope it doesn't detect these levels. But if it does, for that particular artwork, drop it down to level 1. Very low resolution images. So you can see this isn't a great image. It's a nice image, but not a great image. So if it's a very low level resolution, and we're talking things like 32 dpi, so we are talking very low resolution, then you may get another error. It will look at it and it will say it's mottled. It's a mottled image. And again, the workaround is the same: reduce the detection level. So, textured patterns, and this is the artwork. This isn't textured paper. This is in the artwork. So if the artwork looks like this, then again it might detect it as a mottled image. So again, reduce the detection level or switch it off. This is a problem, another limitation, that if the customer is using the decurl for a specific media, the decurl, when it's running, will change the speed of the media at the edge, and it tends to flap the media. So again, if you're using the decurl, I would advise you to switch it off. Any media that needs to use the decurl isn't a supported media on the IQM. The customer can use it, but you can see what the workaround is, and this is what has come from Japan. So set the decurl correction to small. Yeah, then it may work. Change the turn the media over to try and eliminate having to use the decurl. Change it from face down to face up. Mask the detection range from the trailing edge so that any flap that happens from the decurl isn't even detected. And the last one, turn it off and ignore the error. So ideally, if you're using a decurl, don't use the ACD system for that media. So now we move on to, I think this isn't the last section. This is the second from last section. So this is some of the self-maintenance that you need to instruct your customers on. There is a user guide that's I think it's under publications on MyReco. I'll have to check that. But I know there is. If it's not available yet, I know it will be shortly. So self-maintenance. So how can you make the most of the function of image quality management? It says there it's most important to allow users to troubleshoot the anomalies on their own. So you have to explain to a customer that if you're printing a job, for example, and it's detecting that you have a white line, and you check the printout and there's no white line on the printout, then you know logically that there's dust on the TIM red sensor. So it can't see past that speck of dust, and it detects that as a white line. So you have to logically go through the faults with the customer and explain to them, well, if it's telling you this but you're not getting it, then you have to clean this unit. So in that instance, if it was a white line that was detected but isn't on the printout, explain to the customer that they need to go in to the machine, open up the TIM red sensor and wipe the glass in one direction only, and probably wipe the roller underneath it as well. That's always good practice. Okay. So these are some of the things that they tested in the beta test. And so, for example, toner scatter caused by an unclean fusing separation plate. So you get this toner scatter that's over here. What the customer needs to do is be able to recognize that and associate that to what's causing the problem. And the problem in this case is you have toner on the separation plate within the fusing unit. So the customer needs to clean that off. So you need to maybe give the customer a daily maintenance routine of what they need to do in order to be able to use this system. Toner contamination on the first side of duplex. And actually, this wasn't detected by the TIM red sensor because this was on the first page. So the it does the first page isn't detected. So what the customer needs to do is if for example you get toner contamination on the first page, it's not detected and there's no error code, well then it has to be done by the pick-off pools. So you need to go in and clean the pick-off pools because it's on the first side of the page, not the second side. Yeah, Japan are even expecting customers to clean your doctor blade. I'm not convinced that that's a good idea. But Japan are expecting them to do this. With this one, toner scatter caused by an unclean dev unit, clean the doctor blade. But that means giving the customer the doctor blade cleaning tool. And if they pull the doctor blade cleaning tool out wrong, there's the possibility that the tongue that's on the doctor blade cleaning tool breaks off and is in the dev unit, and then you're in a world of pain. So I would suggest that this is one that you tell customers not to do, but that's up to you guys. That's not my call.
Okay, Guus.
Guus again. He's the
a little bit strange about customer maintenance.
Yeah.
And they say you have to look 2 pages in the field service manual. The customer doesn't have it.
No. This is one that I wouldn't allow customers to do. But yeah, I think this is this will give you more problems than it will fix. So
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is in the. I'm not sure if it's explained in the customer guide as well as in the field service manual. I'm not sure who's, but for sure for me, I wouldn't allow customers to do this if I was out in the field. I think it's just going to cause you more problems. If you break off that tongue and if it's in the dev unit, then you get a white band. Nothing you can do about it. You can't get it out.
Yeah.
So it's a complete new dev unit, which that's not cheap.
€1,000.
Yeah. So I would say if it is in that user guide, and I haven't checked to be honest, but if it is in that user guide, explain to customers that they don't do this. Not only that, but you have to take out the drum unit to get to this, and I'm also not convinced that that's a good idea for customers as well.
I agree.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's move on. Excuse me. This one is, you can see it's a bit like worm tracks that we used to get on things like the 901, 900. So it looks a little bit like a worm track, but it's actually where the fusing belt pulls toner off on the second side. There is a flow chart in a minute that you won't be able to read because it looks too small on my slides, but there is a flow chart that is available to you. And when this training material becomes available, download it. You can look at the flow chart itself and take it off. And there's 2 flow charts. One is about reducing the fusing nip. So reduce the nip, but increase the temperature so it still fuses. Flow chart 2 shows about lowering the process speed and lowering the temperature so it still fuses. And for you technical guys, I hope this makes sense to you, because just reducing the nip, you have to increase the temperature in order to get enough heat to actually fuse that onto the page. So it should make sense to you guys. There's the flow charts, and I did say you probably won't be able to read it. Okay, now it's talking about some gloss streaks. With this, you go in and you clean. So you run fuse belt cleaning. You've got some options in there. You can do a short time or a long time for fuse belt cleaning. And Japan recommends you do short time. But if the streak is really bad, then well, either run it for the short time but do it a few times, or just run it on the long time. The problem with fuse belt cleaning is it slowly wears out the fuse belt. It makes it, because scrapes off the top layer of the fuser belt. So that's why they recommend doing it for the 3 seconds. You guys all know about fuser belt cleaning. Now we have a streak. This is the one that I mentioned earlier. So you get a white streak caused by an unclean TIM red sensor. So this is the case where it detects a white streak, but on the printout there is no white streak. And this is caused by your TIM red being dirty. So this is the one that you need to explain to customers. If it's falsely reading a TIM, if it's falsely reading, so I hope you can't hear my dog barking in the background. This dog's going mental. If it falsely reads a white streak, then it has to be contamination with the TIM red sensor. So you just explain to the customer they need to clean it. So somebody mentioned earlier what physical changes have they made, some service improvements to the engine. This is the last section now. I'm not going through all of the improvements that they've made, and you will understand why as I go through them, because this is the Andromeda 1. So this is the PCDU cover on the Andromeda 1. And I'm sorry I didn't take a photo. And on the Andromeda 2, well, they've made a cutout so you can get the toner shield glass out without removing this cover. They've removed a screw here, so you've only got 2 screws, and they've made them captive now so they don't fall out. So you can see that the changes that they've made are not, well, for a technician or a specialist, they're not massive changes. So I've got a few that I go through. They've changed the drum lock handle. They've made it a different shape so it fits lower, and it's so that you can still take out the shield glass that goes through this cover. If that was the same shape, it would have blocked it. On the ITB unit, you don't have to take the cover off anymore. The handles are exposed, so you can pull out the ITB unit without taking the cover off. To access the ITB cleaning brush, you can access it just with 1 screw now. You take it off and out it comes. You have a new jig. You have a new jig so that you can turn the ITB. So it just fits on the shaft, turn it by hand. So how to remove the TIM red exposure glass, there's a few slides on this. So you lift it, you remove this screw, and you can simply slide it out. There is specific cleaning procedures for these units. I haven't done those in the presentation. It's just, look at the service manual for the cleaning procedures. So how to remove the unit? Well, first of all, you remove the exposure glass as in the last slide, and then you can just slide out the exposure unit. Some SP sets, I think this is the last slide. So these are the SP modes for the ACD unit. So all of these are, I'm not going to go through all of them and tell you what to do, because you can just read it. So for example, this one, you have to set it to 1 for on in order to use the ACD unit. It's all in the service manual. The one down the bottom, well, this SP mode switches the logo that appears on the user interface. So for Rico, set it to 0, which is default. For Heidelberg, make sure you set it to number 1, and then the Heidelberg logo will come up. Okay. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. I hope it's clear. Do we have any questions?
Not at the moment, but please open your mic. Roger, or maybe someone else has a question there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can I maybe just a few words from the marketing side, because I can imagine from the service side, given what's happened before, there may be some concern or whatever. around the new ACD system. A couple of things, if I could. First of all, when we start talking to customers about the ACD system, from a marketing side, we're not going to make any references to the old system, okay? And you probably understand the reasons why. So this is something that we're just going to say is that it's effectively a new system with the IQM system as well. The biggest thing here is that this is going to be available at cost. So as Keith mentioned at the beginning, this now becomes an option. And the optional price of this to the customer is going to be about 15,000 euros. Now, it's very difficult for us to justify the standard price of an Andromeda and then put an option out on the product, which is going to cost 15,000 when we don't have any real proof around the performance and the value for the customer. So what we're doing for the operating companies is we are going to give them a promotion which reduces the selling price of the ACD kit. And over time, as this becomes an accepted option, then we will be reducing the cost of that, we'll be increasing the effective cost to the customer. So, but the thing from a service side here is that you need to recognize that this is going to be an option that customers are going to purchase. And when they purchase something specifically as an option, they're going to expect it to be running and to do what it's intended to do. So I know from, and as Keith has mentioned, when we've done the beta tests, we've had good feedback from those beta test customers. I think one comment would be is that actually the machine can be too sensitive. And when we're looking about the IQM system and it's detecting errors, it doesn't mean to say that actually they need to be calling a service engineer every time they get one of those errors. Because in some cases there's nothing, it's not a repeatable error, it's just something that's happened once in a while. And they have turned the sensitivity of that down, but it's for the customer to understand that there might be an error which they are able to see and they can take a corrective action on it. But it's not to be said that every time they see one of those errors, they need to call service. So your challenge in life is going to be how you can manage this option, which is to the benefit of both Rico and the customer, so that they can get the levels of quality out that they need for that print, but with the assurance that the quality is going to be good when they need it to be. All right. So I hope that kind of puts things in perspective here. If you've got any questions for the marketing folk, then I'm happy to answer them also on this call if you had them. Sorry, Keith, that's all I was going to say.
That's good, Neil. And as Neil said, that is your challenge. It's your challenge to train your customers how to use this. Yeah, and I understand that's quite a big ask. But if you don't train your customers, you will get service calls, and that's what we want to avoid. So you have to train them properly.
Yeah. Sorry, Keith. Maybe I should just add one other thing here: is that our competitors have similar devices, okay? Particularly KM. All right, so this is something that customers are going to want to purchase if they feel they need to have that level of confidence in the output. All right, so this is not something unique to Rico. Our competitors have exactly the same type of functionality as well. So yeah, that's something that's also worthwhile bearing in mind.
Although they don't scan the image, they scan the color test charts at the edge.
Exactly, they do it in a slightly different way.
Yeah, which is our selling point. That customers will buy this. So that's your challenge. Not every customer that has an Andromeda will purchase this. Obviously, for customers that don't have this option, then it's not quite such a challenge for you guys. But any customer that does have this option, as Neil mentioned, I had no idea of the price, but as Neil mentioned, it's €15,000. If they spend €15,000 on it, they will expect it to work.
Yeah. What will happen with the price of the machine itself? Will it be lowered because the system is not standard anymore?
That's a very good question. No, it won't. So just let me put this again in context here. The IQM and the ACD system as a package, I say that sort of 15k value is what we expect the market price to be, which is based on what KM is using for theirs. All right, so obviously it might be sold for less than that if the salespeople don't want to make the margin, but just to understand that there is a significant value behind it. The engine itself is not reducing in price, so this is seen as a new value add option. And is not something that we are going to be reducing the price of the Andromeda for, or the 9200.
Okay.
It's always good to have marketing on the call, because I can't ever talk about pricing.
Yeah. And
yeah,
if the customers use this, he buy this option. You have to buy by himself also a PC for. Yep. Okay, that is plus the option plus a PC.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be a high spec PC. You're only running a web browser on it.
Okay.
There's no software to install on the PC. It's just you just access the user interface through the web browser. So the spec doesn't have to be high.
Okay. Other question about the sensitivity of the level. You said this standard 4. The advice is to set it to 2, because if it is on 4, he recognizes faults that you can't see with your bare eyes.
Yeah.
Why they choose for 4 and not for 2?
Yeah, that was my question as well.
And what was the answer?
That we can't change it.
Of course, the customer can change it, so they can change it too.
Yeah, of course. And Japan could change it in the factory.
Sorry, Keith, can you just put that question back to me, because I think I know the answer.
Okay, sorry, Neil, go on.
No, well, could you just remind me what was the actual? Because 4 is not as sensitive, right?
4 is more sensitive.
Welcome to this session.
So I can remember having a meeting with RCL, and I asked that question.
Yeah.
Why would we set it at level 4 when you
when
you can when you can
remember the conversation. Yeah. I think they have set it at that number, and we know from our customers basically that would be too sensitive. So I think that is a change, and we were looking to see whether we could make that change within the configuration center. So let me just check to see exactly where we are with that.
Yeah, because I'm afraid that we only generate extra service calls. Unnecessary.
Yeah, but again, just to kind of put this in perspective, yes, you may get some service calls being generated because we're highlighting problems to the machine. But the challenge that, and it is a challenge to service here, is that just because you see an error, there are some things you can do. But the question is whether there's, if you are having a consistent problems, then the customer might choose and correctly choose to call service. But if they're not having a consistent, but they're getting a small changes, then they've got a decision to make. All right. So and I'll use the word challenge again here for you, is that when you're having those conversations with the customers, do not pitch this the fact that if they see an error, then immediately they have to call service. This is purely telling them that there is something different on their print that they might need to address or remove or reprint it. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's always the answer is to call service for this. But I know from when we did the beta tests, the customer themselves, when the setting was set at the 4 level, they looked at those errors and thought that actually those errors were not something to worry about, and they backed off the sensitivity themselves. Yeah. And then when they had a critical machine, a critical job where they thought they might want to use it, then they increased the sensitivity. So that the default level, yes, I think should be set at a lower level. No, I'll go back and actually check exactly where we are with that.
I know on the beta test machine, it is set to level 2.
Yeah.
And it's only in our region that we're recommending level 2. I don't know how America is doing this. This was a discussion that
I think they have the same view, to be honest.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Does that answer the question, Bruce?
Yeah. It should be nice if marketing can say to Japan, change it to 2, and that they will do it.
Yeah, we can do that in our configuration center, and it's something that if not all opcos wanted to do it that way, there is what's called the CSI sheet, which is a configuration sheet that you're able to change and ensure that's set up the same way. That's something we can manage within Europe.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions? I can't see any hands raised.
Well, just one thing here from Gabriel in Sweden.
Hey, Gabriel.
Hey again. It's regarding the patches you have to print to do the quality, the quality. Yeah.
למה היא מתקשרת אליי כל הזמן?
In Sweden, all our customers are printing full bleed.
Front to back, edge to edge.
Yeah, full bleed. Yeah.
Well, then you can't.
No.
Then you can't use it.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's clear.
Okay. Good.
Is there any other questions? Okay, guys. Well, if you don't have any questions, feel free to leave the meeting. Thank you for your time and for joining. It's been